This is video 7 for week 1. And now I want to talk about ethnographic fieldwork and some issues in ethnographic fieldwork to kind of follow up on the video you just watched about ethnography. So I want you to think about this information in tandem with the reading you're doing in the Bruce Nauft book on the Gabusi, which will give you some good examples of how all of these work out in the field and how Nauft as an anthropologist really grapples with some of these issues. So think about that book and what you've read as we go through this video, or take the information in this video and go back to the Nauft book with it, and then make a note to keep thinking about these things as we continue reading Nauft over the next week. So some methods of ethnographic fieldwork that are pretty much shared by all anthropologists who go out into the field. First of all, you have to live with the group. You know, you have to be there. You have to be in the village or in a house with a family, or be part of the everyday rhythms of life in the place that you're studying. It's very important. So this, there are a couple of processes involved with this. To get to the point where you can really do field work, you have to live with the group long enough to sort of make entree, so that's like, how do you come into the group and figure out your place in it? And you have to build rapport or trust with the people you're going to be working with. You're going to be asking them a lot of questions about themselves and their lives. You're going to be living there. You're going to be watching them. So they have to be able to trust, understand and trust why you're there, what your motives are, what you're going to do with the information. They have to be sure you're not a spy. So this can take a while. It's not straightforward to just go live with a group. It takes a lot of work to get the group comfortable with your living there. Secondly, the anthropologist absolutely must speak the language. So before you even get to the field, for the most part now, you've spent years studying the field language that you'll need to communicate with people. And even once you're in the field, you'll keep studying it, and you'll use an interpreter until you're sure that you're competent and can understand what people are saying. Participant observation. This is probably the most unique method to cultural anthropology. So we have participation and observation, but notice that the word is hyphenated. So this is something beyond either participation or observation. The anthropologist must participate in life in this society. The anthropologist should do what other people do, join the groups that other people join, go through the rituals, the rites of passage, worship, celebrate, harvest, or whatever else that the people are doing. The anthropologist should try to do that too. But while participating, the anthropologist is also observing, analyzing, taking notes, thinking, why is this happening? Why is this person doing this? Why did she just say that to him? What did it mean? Why did he just wink at her? What did that mean? And making notes, either mental notes or notes on paper, to follow up on this information and find out more later. And finally, the anthropologist will do a lot of interviewing. So the things that are observed during participant observation will come up later in interviews, so the anthropologist can get more information or better information, clarification, etc. Okay, so pretty much every example of ethnographic fieldwork will involve these steps. And then there are other methods that can be used that we can see as we read different ethnographies and kind of pull out for discussion. But last couple of notes that really come up a lot in Nauft, as you read that, are a couple of problems. So one is just a pretty mundane problem, and that's the problem of preparing field notes. So think about how hard it is for him as he's participating and observing to make some kind of note of those observations so that he can study them and catalog and theorize them and come back and ask questions about them later. I think he does a good job of just showing the kind of difficulty even of getting your notes down. And then more seriously, a much deeper set of issues in ethnographic fieldwork that he presents are ethical ones. And we'll be discussing these a lot over the next 5 weeks. So think about what kinds of ethical issues come up for him as an anthropologist. Think about how he's concerned with cultural relativism as a tool, but also concerned with, as a human being, allowing himself to make certain kinds of moral judgments, how he's balancing that. Think about that as you read. Some other issues that come in the second part of ethnography, which is the writing or filmmaking or whatever you're doing to produce a work for the audience. I'd like to talk about 3. And again, make note of these. We'll keep talking about them. The first is positionality. So if an anthropologist is participating in everything possible within this society under study, then think about it. It really matters who that anthropologist is. If the anthropologist is male or female, they'll have opportunities to observe and participate in different things. If the anthropologist is American, or someone from the society under study, or someone from another society like the one under study, that can make a huge difference. If you're a native speaker of the language that you're doing field work in, that gives you access to certain things that someone who's not a native speaker does. Religion, class, sexual orientation and identity, all kinds of things come to bear on the fieldwork and the data collection experience. So the positionality of the anthropologist must be understood and dealt with. A second is translation. So not just literally how does an anthropologist translate one word from one language into another for the purpose of the audience to understand it, but even more abstractly, think about how difficult it is for Nauft to translate certain concepts or the meaning behind certain practices to his audience. So, for example, the word kagweye. It's not a simple, straightforward word. We don't really have an equivalent in English, so he has to spend several paragraphs explaining what kagweye is. Look for that. But then also, some of the sexual experiences of the Gabusi, some of the ways that they understand witchcraft, and lots of other things that come up that are ethical issues for him are also translation issues. And you'll see him taking great pains to try to explain, okay, this practice may seem strange to you, but it's not any stranger than this practice you're more familiar with in the United States, and so forth and so on. And that's him trying to translate concepts so that you'll understand them within their context. And that leads to the third issue, which is representation. You may have heard the phrase politics of representation before in other classes, and that gets at our concern that any way that you choose to represent an individual or a group of people has a kind of politics with it. So if Nauft isn't careful, he might represent the Gabusi as truly backwards and wild and savage and exotic. And so it may reinforce your politics of thinking that non-Westerners are savage and backward and so forth and so on. Whereas if he goes too far in the other direction and tries to represent the Gabusi as, well, they're just exactly like us in every way, that carries a different kind of politics, a different kind of representation that overrides some of the key differences between the Gabusi and Americans or other people who may be reading this book. Okay, so take special note of where and how you see him trying to make a particular representation of the Gabusi.